voice goes during the meeting. I'll try and speak as little as I can. I think today is probably a good strategy. So first of all, attendance. I see online myself, Mandy and Peter as cabinet members, Mark Thomas, officer. Richard, do you want to go through who's in the chamber?
We've got Councillor Joe Gordon, Councillor David Daniels, Councillor Sue Morgan, Councillor Fiona Cross, and instead of the Chief Exec today, we've got the Deputy Chief Exec David Leach and a cast of thousands in the gallery waiting to speak on report. You don't know those named individually, do you?
That's great, just so I know who's who when they come in. That's great. Apologies then. Is it just Stephen Vickers?
Yes,
yeah,
Leader.
Because all cabinet members are present. The third item then is declarations of interest. Derek, anything we need to go through there?
Thank you, Leader. I haven't been made aware of any interest to declare. Thank you.
Right, if anything does come up, then feel free to raise in the normal way. So on to item 4 then, which is minutes from the meeting on the 14th of October. Any issues anyone wants to raise there? No matters rising. Is everyone happy to agree those then? Great, that's carried. The action sheet, I believe there are no items outstanding on there. Anything anyone needs to raise on that? If not, that's item 5 complete, which moves us then on to item 6, which is the initial revenue estimates report for 26-27. Just looking at, is Andrew and Rob coming down there?
Good morning, Cabinet. The paper we've got in front of us today is the initial revenues estimates for 26-27. This is the look at next year's budget. I'll hand over to Rob in a minute to go through the detail, but just in terms of the headlines, as you can see, we've got a budget gap of just under £3 million, £2.85 million to address going forward, which is a challenge, but it's certainly a challenge that we're used to dealing with in terms of budget gaps at this point of the budget cycle, so we're working our way through that. As the paper acknowledges, this paper is made on the assumption that we get an increase in the core grant from Welsh Government of 2.5%. I'm pleased to announce yesterday the draft settlement was announced by Welsh Government and we've been allocated 3%, so a little bit more than we assumed, so that is good news and that will go a long way of addressing the gap of £2.85 million in terms of the revenue budget for next year. We're still working through the detail because there's a lot of appendices and details about individual grants, so we'll work our way through those to make sure we understand the full impact on the budget, and this will come back to yourselves and Cabinet in January next year. So if I can hand over to Rob Green to go through the detail, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks Andrew. Morning all. So the report you've got in front of you, as Andrew said, largely covers the outlook for next year's revenue budget, but you'll see that it does just start with a quick update on the 25-26 in-year position. You'll recall that you last received an update in respect of month 4, at which point we were reporting a projected adverse variance of 624,000. So it's pleasing to be able to confirm that that figure is now reduced. So as at month 6, we were down to a figure of 464. And the trajectory that we expected in terms of continued improvements throughout the rest of the year is also coming to fruition because the initial month 7 position looks more positive again. So overall, we're absolutely heading in the right direction in year. There aren't any major pressures in the in-year position compared to, say, last year when we had a big pressure in terms of children's services. There are some slightly smaller ones. The main ones are consistent with what we reported at month 4 in terms of housing benefits subsidy, the impact of the farm opening mid-year, that sort of thing, but nothing really significant or material. And as I said, there's reasonable confidence that barring any unforeseen significant pressures emerging, we would hope to achieve a balanced position or better than that by the end of the year. So turning to 26-27, there are a number of tables within the report that highlight the position. So sort of starting with the first table that gives the initial gross estimate of 0.098 million as our sort of initial budget gap, but then instantly reducing to 10.438 based on the assumed funding of Welsh Government funding for pressures we've had in this year being transferred into the settlement. As Andrew alluded to, that was confirmed yesterday, and as part of that provisional settlement announcement, we know that those grants are being transferred in, and actually at a slightly higher value than we have there, so that's another small positive in terms of where that leaves us in terms of the budget gap. Just giving some highlights as to what sort of assumptions we're making within those figures. So we're assuming employee-related costs will increase by 3%. Clearly, we don't know what that will actually be until pay awards are confirmed, but that's broadly in line with where we've been in this year. We're also working on the basis that the employer's rate for the LGPS pension contributions will reduce, which will be the first time in a number of years, and based on the high performance of all pension funds, really, because of investments doing so well. So actually we're expecting that to come down, which is obviously something that's beneficial. That's already reflected within that initial estimate. We're assuming a 3% increase on the fire levy in line with our pay assumption. We're factoring in our estimated impact of the announcement of the real living wage at 6.75%, which mainly impacts in sort of third-party spend on social care and things like that. And we're modelling demand based upon either current usage or adjusted where we anticipate a change. And that also applies to pupil numbers within schools as well, where the latest estimates tell us that the numbers are actually going to reduce, and therefore the funding will move in line with that, as we've done in previous years. So the main pressures within those figures are linked to those assumptions around pay, around demand. We've also, though, got just a couple of things to highlight. One is the pupil-led funding reduction for pupil number differences specifically. Still an overall growth proposed in the school budget, but that element particularly reducing. And also the opportunity and ability to withdraw a year ahead of schedule the £1 million base budget for the Children's Services Transition Plan, simply because performance has been a lot better, a lot quicker than was expected, and actually there'll be enough reserve funding still available going into next year to underwrite that transition plan, meaning that the budget element can actually be withdrawn early. So that's another positive for the budget position going into next year. So in terms of funding, as Andrew said, the settlement was announced yesterday. We were assuming a 2.5% increase. That was based on indications from Welsh Government. That has now been confirmed specifically for Torfaen at 3%. So that is clearly a positive. The average has ended up about 2.7 across Wales, but that's largely because of the introduction of floor funding for certain authorities who would have seen a lower increase or even a decrease in their funding. So 3% is positive. And also, as I said earlier, we've had confirmation that those grants will be transferred in, and actually at a higher level in some cases than we were initially modelling. And as well as that, we have also benefited from the underlying data within the formula. So everything within the formula is relative, but we have seen some underlying improvements in our relative share of the settlement as well. So lots of things pointing in the right direction. And that obviously helps when it comes to trying to balance the overall position and readiness for March. And just to confirm, the other side of the coin in terms of unhypothecated funding is council tax, and these estimates reflect the original planning assumption of 4.95% increase, which is what was reflected in our previously published NTFP. So taking what we knew before yesterday into account, it left us with a gap of 2.847 million. And then applying the continuation of the assumption around schools absorbing their non-pay related inflation, which is always the smaller share of their inflation, 311,000 reduces the gap down to basically 2.5 million. So obviously there's still 2.5 million to address. Yesterday's announcement will go part way to dealing with that, but there is still a need to identify mitigations in order to achieve a balanced budget by March. And there's a list there of the sorts of things that are being considered and will be considered over the next few weeks in order to work up that position. So things like, are there any efficiencies from the federated model we're now working to with Blaenau Gwent? Is there any alternative way of funding certain pressures? Could we use reserves where appropriate? Could we use specific grants to cover certain costs, again, where appropriate? Obviously, whilst we've had some indications of the grants at an All Wales level as part of yesterday's announcement, there are still some where there are TBCs in the documentation, so we don't have the full picture on grants yet, but that may present some opportunities. It could also present some pressures as well, and we don't know until we get our own individual allocations. You know, can we identify other options? Can we identify further mitigations? Can we look at certain items within the estimates and actually can they just be absorbed or mitigated? The council tax base often gives a little bit of help as well if the overall tax base is increasing. And then, yeah, as we said, the Welsh Government funding we now know is slightly better than expected. So in terms of the risk section, some of that risk has been taken away because the provisional settlement has been announced, but others are still there and will be for some time. Ultimately with pay, we don't know what that will be until it's confirmed and announced. Specific grants, as I just said, we don't know exactly what our allocations will be and whether any pressures will arise from that. But generally, you know, a lot of those risks we would hope aren't material. Like I said, a lot of them have now been addressed as part of yesterday's announcement. Just one other comment before I close, and we've got the timetable set out there, but also just to confirm that cross-cutting scrutiny considered a very, very similar report last week. So we will be receiving recommendations from that committee, but generally the questions were addressed within that meeting, and I didn't get the sense that there was any large discontent or anything like that, but clearly until we get those formal recommendations we won't know for sure. And yeah, I think that's it in terms of the overview of the report.
Thank you both. Very much welcome the report and the progress that you've outlined. I think it's important at these junctures to sort of explain the different terms that we use. The budget gap, of course, is different from an overspend or anything like that looking into next year. That's just the difference between the forecast of the amount of money that we think we'll have and the amount of money that we estimate that it'll cost to run services. And that's based on a budget of over £250 million, as is shown in the tables. So those figures look big, but you know, we've got track record of managing those. So I look forward to the work that's to come on that, as well as thanking officers for the work that's been done and members too. The settlement, as has been said, came in slightly above what we're hoping for, but Welsh Government have been very keen to mention that is the draft settlement and not the final one. I'll continue lobbying for more money for local services within that to help bridge that gap, and others are too as well. So I'm hoping that there'll be more good news coming from the Senedd there to sort of address what is a very difficult funding situation for local government across Wales. Also welcome the progress that's been made on the in-year position. It's a lot less challenging than last year's in-year position was, but still one that requires discipline and that requires work across the council. So I welcome the hard work that's been going on there. Particularly welcome that news on the Children's Services Transition Plan that we've talked about so much over the last 2 years, and that's very welcome progress. And just thank you to everyone involved in that. So I'll leave my comments there. Are there any other questions or comments from anyone else online or in the chamber?
If I could, Leader, just to reassure myself that the estimates have been modelled on the basis of a steady state, continuing with services as they are. I think in the context where we know other local authorities sadly are struggling and are looking at service provision cuts, if you could reassure me on that, I'm pretty confident that we're maintaining all our services for this estimate.
I'm happy to confirm, yes, it's based on a steady state.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Andrew. Any more questions? Or are we happy to move to the recommendations at 12.1? You'll see the recommendations there at 12.1. There that we note the updated financial forecast for 25-26. We note the initial estimates for the proposed approaches for addressing the budget gap. And we note the timetable for the remainder of the 26-27 budget setting process. Are we all happy to agree those recommendations? I believe I can see lots of very small hands on the screen there. So there's no votes against and no abstentions. That's carried unanimously. Okay, can we go on to agenda item 7 then? That's the Pride in Place Fund report. And if I hand over initially to Jo Gordon.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So our town centres have always played a fundamental role in shaping and nurturing our local communities. We are familiar with the pressures faced by town centres in recent years with limited investment and a social behaviour change where shopping online or at retail parks is favoured. The decline in the high street is more than just empty shops, though. It's the loss of social spaces for community interaction, local jobs and a loss of pride in our towns, which undermines our communities. We know that regenerating our town centres boosts both our local economy by attracting new businesses, jobs and visitors to our towns and improves our residents' well-being and creates sustainable communities. We prepare for the future generation in our towns by consulting with our stakeholders and our local communities to develop a shared vision, which is detailed in our placemaking plans. Once approved by members, our plans then guide future investment and regeneration as funding opportunities become available. Our capital budget for regeneration is limited for significant investment, so identifying external funding opportunities to match fund projects is key to bringing investment into the borough, and this includes private finance from a range of investors. In 2023, we successfully bid to the UK Government Levelling Up Fund for a package of regeneration projects at the Southway Gateway to Pontypool Town Centre, which is adjacent to the town's beautiful and well-used park. The project aims to tap into the high footfall at the park, bringing more economic activity and energy up into the town. The package includes creating a cafe overlooking the Italian gardens, a private development to bring a derelict church back into use as a restaurant or cultural venue, and making improvements to safety and accessibility in the Glantorvine public car park to support the increase of visitors into town. Work on the cafe is progressing well, with a planning application expected to be submitted soon, and also will soon see visible works on the private development of St James's Church, creating the restaurant cultural venue as the legal agreement to release funding is agreed. Work on the final design of the car park is well advanced and delivery time to align with the opening of the cafe and the church. However, rising costs have increased the pressure for the project to stay within the budget envelope. In September this year, UK Government announced £1.5 million for Pride in Place impact funding for Torvine. Delivery of this funding is in line with our delivery timetable for our Levelling Up funding project, and this extra funding will help reduce the risks associated with rising costs to secure delivery, and with any surplus funds being used to bring forward other key elements of the Pontypool placemaking plan, particularly to connect the park to the town centre. With an improved Pontypool Town placemaking plan to guide investment, the report today seeks to align the Pride in Place funding to our Levelling Up funding project in Pontypool. Our ambition to create a cafe cultural quarter at the gateway to Pontypool will in turn increase footfall and visitors to our well-loved market town and act as a catalyst for investment. If approved today, officers will agree a memorandum of understanding for the future with UK Government and begin work with the contractors to drive delivery. And I'll hand to Greg MacDonald, our Head of Economy and Place, and also say welcome. It's your first Cabinet with us today, isn't it? Thank you.
Oh, we're there, in the room. Good morning, everyone. Yes, so this is my first Cabinet meeting, so it's good to be here and it's good to meet you all. I think you've just heard the background to the report, and what this report is seeking is the consideration of the using the £1.5 million from the Pride in Place Impact Fund to ensure the implementation of the first phase of the Pontypool placemaking plan. And I think the key to this is that we have a number of projects that are being put together and brought together. So we have firstly the church, which is next door here, and has and is really seen as a focus for not only improving the activation of the area, but also the as a gateway and the first impression when you come out of the park and when you're coming by car. So I think that's very sort of key in terms of that investment and the role that plays in bringing together this first phase. And then the other two projects which we've been talked through is the CAF and the car park. And I think I'd just like to note the good work of the team to actually bring this together as a package of projects and to get the economies of scale by doing it in that way. So we have, as you've said, it's at Ariba Stage 3, so they'll be going to planning early in the new year and after this meeting to drive that forward. But what I would say as part of this, and there is always a number of questions, why here, why there, and I think the most important thing that we need to do in any town centre is get the attraction for projects. So I think we all want to move at pace and get things done, but unless you get the traction and get some things out the ground, then you can't move forward. And if you do try and move too fast, then you'll fall over and you'll be back in the same space in a few years' time. So these schemes, and again, I'm new to the area, but they're a good package of schemes. They will bring the traction that the town needs to actually bring further investment into the town. So I think I just want to sort of make that point. And I think also what you've got here in terms of a package is the risk, that there's been a cost to the risk. So the risk has been costed. So this package, that risk of inflation and increased costs in the construction costs has all been taken into account, and this will enable these schemes to happen. I think that's absolutely key. It's the implementation. And I think you can see it all around Great Britain, where we're looking at the town centres. There's so many schemes that have got to a certain stage of a good idea, but haven't actually got the implementation. This scheme can be, I mean, in terms of what we've got here, is a scheme we can drive forward now. So I think that's about the actual schemes. In terms of the risk, there is a risk, if we don't move this forward at pace, as we said, like a lot of town centres, we'll lose the match funding we've got. So we have to spend, of that £1.5 million, we have to spend or get 750,000 out the door by the end of this year, by March 26. So if we don't get that underway now, that will be lost. There's also the funding from, there's a grant in terms of a Welsh Government grant as well that also has the same time frame that will be lost as well. So there's that very sharp risk in that sense. And there's also, this is a package of schemes that we've said. It's important at first phase. It will give us the traction that we need. But part of that traction is getting a private investor on board, which is extremely a hard thing to do in any part of the country, and particularly in areas where the town centres are struggling. So we've got that investment on board. But if we don't move at the pace we need to move, then that will be lost. And that will give a sign to other investors that maybe they have to think twice about investing in the area. So the fact we've got an investor, and if we can pull that in, which the schemes will do, that will give the sign that this is the place to invest. And it'll be that first step, and it'll be the attraction that we need in that part of the market as well. So just to remind again, being coming to this new, but there's, as you'd expect, there's a sunk cost already. So we've already spent nearly £1 million getting here, and that's the reality of it. To actually get these schemes done, it costs a lot of money up front to get all the fees and drawings done and all those sorts of things. So we've already spent that amount of money. And also, I think the nervousness that I have, it's one hard thing to get a grant, but the thing you do not want to do is hand it back. And that's a risk on reputation. And as we enter a new era of a new stream of funding coming online for the 1st of April, we need to be on the front foot and show that if we get the funding, we can spend it. And this scheme will enable that. So I think it's just, saying the inflation is a big in terms of risk, and it's the uncertainty around that, but we've allowed for that in terms of this extra funding. I will say again, because I think it's so important, and I've had this in a lot of authorities I've been in, traction is key. absolutely key. You've got to get something out of the ground, and this is this is your opportunity. So, to draw this sort of to a point and take any questions or points of clarification, the extra £1.5 million will reduce the risk, so we can get on with the scheme. And there is likely, I would guess, there's likely to be a surplus, and any surplus we get because of the risk hasn't occurred, is that will be reinvested back into the town. So I'll take any questions on the back of that. Thank you. Turn the right. Got to turn off as well.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions on the report? And thanks, Joe, too. Okay, John, come in.
Joe, come in.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to pop back in for a minute. I just want to re-emphasise a couple of points that we really need to reimagine our town centres as they are now if we want them to thrive. We know shopping behaviours have changed, but we also know that the food and drink sector is demonstrating resilience and optimism, so that's our project is capturing that. I don't think we've mentioned that the project will create an extra, new 36 jobs as we tease that footfall up from into town, creating those cafe and the cultural hub, creating those jobs. And that investment will also safeguard existing jobs that are already here in our town and act as a catalyst for future investment. Work on the project design is ongoing and we continue to value engineer. So any surplus funding that becomes apparent, then we can release that for future projects in Pontypool Town. And if that's the case, then I'd expect a report to come back to Cabinet for us to consider. Thank you, Leader.
Leader, Councillor Sue Morgan, come in.
Thank you. Just a question around the wider town, really. How does this scheme help us to overcome the challenges of regenerating this very much loved market town that we know sadly has so many empty properties that are privately owned? And given the challenges that all high streets are facing, how do we bring those properties back into use and build that thriving town we want?
Sorry, Leader, we're just connecting one of the microphones to answer the question.
Yeah, while colleagues are just getting set up, if I sort of set the scene a little. In terms of the approach that we would take to this town centre regeneration, we use what we call the triple bottom line as our sort of framework. And that is targeting it from an economic perspective, a social perspective and an environmental perspective. So what Greg has outlined in the report today is very much physical infrastructure, a focus on physical infrastructure that really seeks to enhance the economic aspect of the town centre. But the other two elements are equally as important. And we are doing a lot of work around the market currently, and occupancy rates have recently increased in the market through a direct intervention of the officers and working with the businesses there. The property team are working with us to target acquisitions within the town centre because, as you've mentioned, Councillor, a number of the properties are privately owned. So we really want to work alongside those to influence their business decisions as much as they can so that it's in line with our master plan for the town centre. And from an environmental perspective, of course, we've got a beautiful park here, and that is an area that we will be looking to really connect more into the town centre as this master plan continues. And Greg makes a really important point here today in terms of this is about creating traction. And, you know, many of you may be asking, well, why are we focusing on this part of the town alone? And it's not very just this alone, but we need to create that traction to not only create these jobs, but to protect existing jobs in the town centre, but also, importantly, attract that catalyst for further investment. So it's that, you know, starting with a small fire, but it creating over time into a larger roaring fire. I'll hand over to my colleague, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so to answer your question, in tandem with delivering the Pontypool Cultural Hub and Cafe Quarter, the Council has supported 6 property owners in Pontypool Town Centre, bringing vacant premises back into beneficial reuse through retail and residential. We continue to work with a number of property owners within the town, through UK government SPF initiatives, small property enhancements, and our foundation economy team are proactive, and just reiterating what Christina said, supporting the indoor market, and the occupancy rate now is in excess of 80%, which is great for Pontypool.
Just to add to that, really, is I think being new to the town as well, clearly I've been around the town, you've got amazing footfall in the park, absolutely amazing footfall in Tesco's, and we are where we are with that, but this is the gateway to draw that in, and then the opportunity is there to draw it along the street. So I think this is why that's so important, and I didn't realise that until I was here at the weekend, and it is stark between the town and the park and at Tesco's. So I think a lot of town centres, one, they would love this sort of scheme because it's something that's out that you can get out of the ground and drive forward. But two, to have the footfall, that amount of footfall so near to you, but not quite in the town, that's the opportunity.
Okay. Thanks all. Are there any more questions in the room, or Mandy's got one online, I know. Mandy, do you want to come in next?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I know that a lot of background work has been done on this project, but I just wondered what research have we done to ensure that the cafe lease is going to be attractive to local caterers to build a thriving and sustainable business going forward?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So during the bid stage, the council commissioned a commercial expert to undertake market testing to determine the viability of the scheme. So that report concluded that the cafe is viable and can accommodate the 60 covers that we're seeking to achieve through the investment.
Right, thank you. Any other questions? I guess as always with projects like this, it's just explaining, I guess, the limitations of grant funding, but also the fact that we're dealing with, the world as it is, as opposed to the world as we want it to be, and trying to make a difference there. So I welcome those points that have been made. Any more questions before we move to the recommendations?
No one indicating, Leader.
Okay, great. So the recommendations are at the bottom of the report. Just scrolling down, sorry, a second. Recommendation at paragraph 8.1, that Cabinet approves the utilisation of the £1.5 million Pride in Place Fund to enhance and drive delivery of the vision for Pontypool Town Centre, agrees the Pride in Place Impact Fund Memorandum of Understanding, and notes the update on the Pontypool Cultural Hub and Cafe Quarter. Are we all happy to approve that report? I believe that's unanimous. There's no votes against. No abstentions. No, that's carried. Thank you, officers, for your hard work on that. Next is agenda item 8, which is the Climate and Nature Emergency Annual Report. I'm going to hand over initially to Sue on this.
Thank you, Leader. This report covers the third year of delivery of our programme of work to respond to the twin challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss. And Cabinet colleagues will recall that it was recently discussed at Policy Development Forum. But can I start by saying that the threat to our communities, to our beautiful valley, to the health, prosperity and well-being of our families is very real, and it's imminent. The recent flooding in which our council teams were flat out supporting our communities and those of our neighbours in Monmouthshire should leave us in no doubt of that, if we ever were. There's no time to put our heads into the sand or our fingers in our ears, if that's not too mixed a metaphor. Some members of this council may want to convince us that the threats come from other directions, and they might want to divert us to issues of traffic management or pseudo-patriotic gestures. But this Labour administration knows better. Our communities are already suffering the effects of climate change, and even if the actions in this report were a net cost to the Council, they would be a cost worth paying. But they aren't. The report clearly shows that our work to tackle these twin emergencies is bringing in considerable external funding, and it's securing lower running costs for countless council and community buildings, functions and organisations. And that's freeing money for teachers, for community support, for 1,000 other things, and reducing the impact on our environment at the same time. So the report demonstrates how many of the Council's activities have a role to play, both in responding to the emergencies, but also delivering our services in integrated ways that maximise the well-being benefits that they also deliver to our communities and residents. Just some examples. Planting trees, it's not only good for biodiversity, but it helps to improve local air quality. It mitigates flood risk, and it captures and stores carbon which would otherwise be released into the atmosphere. Putting PV panels on buildings and additional insulation on our schools and council-owned buildings not only reduces emissions, it saves money on fuel costs that are directed to other priorities. Repairing or reusing items and encouraging our communities to do the same not only reduces waste, saves money, reduces the need for new goods to be produced, and helps reduce our carbon emissions. And we know that supporting nature to thrive helps us tackle things like flooding issues by encouraging open areas of green and thriving vegetation, but they are places we want to go. Those are places that support our mental health and our physical health and well-being. So all of these things are interwoven and produce a range of benefits. So what have we been doing throughout 24-25? Well, we've been supporting community centres, sports centres, charities and businesses to reduce the carbon footprint of their buildings. Funded by the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, 38 schemes have been supported, with a total projected annual cost saving to them of over £200,000, and an estimated annual CO2 saving of 346 tonnes. We've been continuing to support a range of initiatives aimed at avoiding waste in the first place, including the Repair Cafe, the Steelhouse Reuse Shop, the Nappy Library, and I'm really keen that we keep developing this range of options. We've designated a new local nature reserve, Blaen Sucken, in Abersucken. Councillor Gordon and I had a very nice walk there on the weekend it was launched. It's beautiful, and it's officially become Torfaen's 8th, and I say that again, 8th for such a small borough, our largest local nature reserve. It covers 72 hectares of land. So in terms of the plan, most of the actions, 81%, are on target and have been completed. In terms of reaching net zero by 2030, the emissions that we have under our direct control have remained largely stable, having borne down on them in previous years to a level that we're really proud of. We've maintained that level. And it's an indication that the behaviour change in terms of managing the heat of buildings, for example, those behaviour changes that can take real time to embed in our workforce, these have become entrenched. This is how people naturally and normally behave now, and I'm really pleased about that. Additional investment in efficiency measures for our buildings have been agreed. So this is an entrenching year where we're laying the foundations for more measures that will make our buildings even more energy efficient and mean that further carbon reductions are anticipated in the future. And every kilowatt hour of energy that we save results in a financial saving for the Council. But going forward, we know there are going to be challenges because much of that easy-to-implement, low-hanging fruit has already been picked. But our approach is a good example of how we are thinking about the longer term, aiming to prevent problems occurring and working more closely with our communities. And those of us, including the leader and myself, that attended the recent Climate and Nature gathering in Pontypool, were blown away by the fact that there are so many residents and local organisations that care about our environment. And we know there's still a lot of work to be done, but this work and the wider benefits it provides for our communities continues to be a priority for the Council going forward. I'll hand over to Mark now, who will take us through the detail of the report, and welcome your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan, and good morning, members. Before I start, really, just to introduce, I've obviously got Gren Ham and Michelle Shaughnessy with me as well, who will help with any technical queries that you may have, and are integral into the success of this project and this works programme. It's important to note, I would suggest, that that this programme also contributes to how we're looking to better support our communities as part of our emerging deal and our missions, which underpin our Marwat ambitions as a council to address social inequalities. So I really look at this programme of work as being a centre point in terms of achieving that ambition, which I think is important to note. As Councillor Morgan has mentioned, this update covers years 24-25, so it's April 24 to March 25. The report covers 4 work streams and actions that deliver our objectives, which obviously have been laid out in the report. Section 1 of this report gives an overview of our performance and delivery plan RAG status at the moment. Section 2 provides end-of-year update status on actions. Section 3 provides greater detail on key projects. So, as Councillor Morgan said, one of the projects that's been quite exciting is the peatland restoration project, which covers both carbon sequestration, but also holds water within our landscapes, helping to reduce flooding. And that's really important in terms of going forward, in terms of that innovative approach that officers and members have adopted. Section 3 also covers the funding mechanisms, so how we actually deliver on these projects, and an overview of our plans for the next year as well. If I may, some of the key issues I've picked up from the report and looking at how we're progressing through the year, and there's room for improvement as well. So having annual performance indicators is all well and good in terms of reporting to members on progress, but really the lack of a quarterly update doesn't allow us to adopt a sort of adaptive management programme of managing these key deliverables as well. So that's something, members, that we're looking to change going forward as well, so that we can track through the year progress on some of these deliverables, as opposed to wait till the end of the year, when sometimes it's often too late to make those corrective changes. So that's just something that I thought I'd share in terms of we're not resting on our laurels here. We're constantly looking to improve. The report covers good news on emissions, as Councillor Morgan has said, especially in the Council's direct control. As mentioned, building emissions have reduced from our baseline by 28.6%, which is significant, as has street lighting to a similar element as well. We've still got work to do on our fleet and equipment emissions as well, but one of the areas that we haven't really made progress on, which we're seeking to do, which is slightly indirect emissions, but it's how our staff are commuting as well. But I think that's going to be linked in with our sort of fleet review. It's good to see real progress on our Project Apollo Energy programme. Now that was obviously supported through Torfaen Council capital investment as well. As Councillor Morgan has alluded to, we've had real positive improvements in terms of reducing the running costs and through the rollout of renewable energy schemes, but also really positive is sometimes the hard to achieve is that behavioural change and then improvements in how our buildings are being managed in a more efficient manner, and that has been particularly pleasing to pick out of the report. Indirect emissions are a challenge, as you probably appreciate. The supply chain emissions have increased, and that's really been attributed to 2 key points. One is how Welsh Government have altered their reporting methodology, so changing the goalposts, which is difficult for us to provide a consistent update on, but that's just to share, that's one area. And obviously we've had increased investment in our construction activities in 24-25, which obviously has an obvious impact. Section 4.9 covers some key successes, and to give a brief flavour of these, I suppose, in Workstream 1, we've undertaken the fleet review. but we still have work to do in terms of rationalising that fleet and then transitioning into renewable energy fleet. So that work is underway and will progress into next year as well. But we're confident that we'll make real progress on that. And that's sometimes hard to do because that's impacting not just on the fleet that we have, but on staff's sort of customer practice as well. So there's been involvement there with unions as well. So that's a good piece of work that's going ahead. Workstream 2, I'm really pleased to see, and then I think it's a real shot in the arm, is the Solar Together scheme, where it's a real positive, helping residents take advantage of discounted PV panels with options for battery storage and vehicle charging options. So I think that's a real benefit. Again, on the flip side, we still, across the region, haven't really come to grips with how we allow our residents to charge on street, and that's something we really need to get a grip on and move forward on as well. Workstream 3 is important in terms of supporting our community to be more resilient in the face of climate change, and again, this has obvious links with our emerging deal and our Mission 5, which is creating more resilient communities, working collaboratively and producing co-designed solutions. One of the key schemes of driving forward is delivering on our objectives within the flood risk management plan, which members approved last year. Workstream 4, we've made significant progress protecting our biodiversity, and obviously with the officers mentioned here, obviously Andrew Osborne and Veronica Branovich were very much at the forefront of this as well. And we're looking through our Mission 5 to boosting our volunteers so that we, as Councillor Morgan said before, encourage our communities to embrace and take pride in their environment, not just the built environment, but the natural environment as well. And obviously that helps with their well-being as well. Section 6 of the report covers the financial side of things, and it really does control how we will phase our improvements, but only when financially viable. So we've achieved a low-hanging fruit, and what we have to look at now, and what we have been looking at, is a strategy in terms of only progressing now when the market allows us to progress those projects. So an example being, we've held slightly in terms of PV panels until the market has matured to a point where this equipment the cost is reducing, and very much as we discussed before in terms of our transition from petrol and diesel into electric as well. The market seems to be viable in terms of smaller vehicles, but still hasn't matured to such an extent where we feel that we're going to transition en masse into our HGV fleet as well. But we're looking at that and working closely with the markets to ensure that we're ahead of the game, scanning the horizon, and only act when it's financially viable for us to do so. So whilst I've mentioned the finance side, that covers the risk as well, in terms of we progress when financially viable. As an aside, if I may, I'd also like to extend my gratitude. I'm immensely grateful for the support, guidance and leadership of the Cabinet subgroup. To have such support is hugely beneficial to officers, and we will jointly be involved in preparing how we adapt our climate and nature emergency plan to transition beyond 2027. So again, my sincere thanks and gratitude for the support and guidance that we get. The other target, or the other challenge that we have, is how we work more closely with Blaenau Gwent through our federated model as well, and that is already bringing benefits. Those conversations are already happening in terms of officers across both authorities, and that's really pleasing to see. So therefore, I think the ask of Cabinet today is to review the report and consider whether they wish to approve that report going forward. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mark. Questions? I've got Peter online, and then Sue in the chamber.
Thank you, Leader. Mark, you mentioned in your talk there about on-street charging and the issues with that. What thought have you given to avoiding pavement obstructions? Because that's going to be an issue, particularly for pedestrians, you know, mums with prams, etc. I worry about things like trailing wires, and so, you know, can you just tell us a little bit about what you're going to do about that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. It's a good question. It's something that's been challenged. It's challenged a lot of authorities, especially valley authorities where we have limited off-street parking and a significant pressure on our on-street parking space. There have been trials. We've been watching trials in other authorities. There's a range of options in terms of those possibilities. Some of them can be done. So, for example, in new builds where you're actually putting in new infrastructure, some authorities have been looking at the lighting columns being dual use, so that they can actually supply a plug-in point into the vehicle, which usually the lighting columns are positioned at the front of curb, virtually in front of footway, so that prevents the trailing curbs. But a lot of this is going to have to be retrofitted and have to rely on the capacity of the existing power supplies and cables within the communities. So they are looking at sort of putting in sort of lockable sort of trenches with flaps on them as well, so that those cables are secured and don't trail across footways. But again, that's down to residents' discipline, education and enforcement as well. So that's the sort of approach we're going to take. Again, we're working with local authorities, but as you know, Councillor, if it had been simple, it had been solved by now.
I've seen some solutions like I hesitate to use brand names, but sort of Kerbo that sort of can retrofit sort of channeling. I'm thinking of like some of the terraced houses in places like Griffithstown, Sebastopol, and other areas of the valley as well, to try and get a solution for those people who are buying EVs but then struggling with charging.
Yes, Ida, that's something that we're looking at. That's one of the options that is being trialled as well.
Sorry, did Sue want to speak?
Councillor Daniels and then Sue want to come in. So do you want to bring David in?
Great.
Thank you, Chair. Slightly different direction. Yeah, I mean, Sue refers to, you know, those who would deny the work that we're doing here, and I take great heart from it. I think there's a lot to take as a positive from it. You know, 80% of the targets being either met or nearly being met, and you know, there's some stuff in there that I think absolutely the argument needs to be made. Yeah, you know, the fact that it saved by putting solar panels on top of Able Radio, that saved £1,500 a month for them. That's just, you know, you cannot deny the benefit of that. So I do take great heart from the work that's been done here. And for me, the main thing is sustaining this, keeping this going, because I think there are some that would not want this to continue, and those people are Reform, and I'm going to call them out because they have made very explicit comments around net zero and climate change, which have been, quite frankly, unscientific. You know, we see comments online around, you know, the increased heat that we see in the summer being, you know, that's fine. You know, we see this sort of temperature abroad. But the big difference is we're not used to that here, and we're not prepared for that here. Or that flooding is purely down to drains being blocked. And you know, that is just demonstrably not true. I've made a couple of notes, if you'll just indulge me. I think it's going to be very clear that we're going to see very hot and extremely hot days increased going forward. And that has implications, that has very real-world implications that go beyond a nice sunny day. We are seeing that, I think a recent report has said that farmers have reported, 78% of farmers have reported having drought on their land. This is the food that we eat, and this is an immediate impact that we will feel. The NHS, the long-term average for heat-related deaths in England and Wales is 634 in a year. In the hot summer of 2022, there were 4,500 heat-related deaths. So this is a trend that we will see, and that is not accounting for the people that were admitted to hospital and didn't die. So the burden on the NHS is going to be increased as a result of heat-related illness. So that's heat. Flooding, I think that that same study also found that 86% of farmers had experienced extreme flooding on their land. Again, I don't need to draw the line there. This is the food that we eat. The Environmental Agency assesses that 13% of agricultural land is at risk of river or coastal flooding. And the government reports that more than half of the UK's prime Grade 1 agricultural land is at risk. And that includes Lincolnshire, which is a recent report by the think tank Climate Central estimates that a third of Lincolnshire is estimated to be below the annual flood level by 2050. And Lincolnshire, the relevance of that is that is one of the most productive agricultural areas in the UK. That is a problem. The Environmental Agency also estimates that 6.3 million properties across England, and I couldn't find the data for Wales, but the relevance is clear to see, are at risk of flooding from rivers, seas, and surface water. And this could rise by 8 million. Tenbury Wells in England was hit by floods in 2019, 2020, 2023, 2024, and some properties there are now uninsurable. And that is a trend we could possibly see going all across Wales, all across the UK. And that brings me to the adage that you may not believe in climate change, but your insurer sure as hell does. So the reason I brought all this up is because this is outstanding work. There's a heck of a lot gone into making this happen, and there's a heck of a lot that is going into continuing it. There are people who don't want this work to continue, and we need to be we need to defend against that, because this is just existential. So I'm very passionate about this, as you can imagine, but it feels like a point for me to speak out and for us all to speak out, which we are doing. So thank you for your work, and long may it continue.
Thank you, Councillor Daniels, for what you've said there. I think it just re-emphasises the urgency that we collectively feel as a Cabinet around this issue, and the obligation that we have to not just ourselves but to our children, to our grandchildren and their children. Because we are stewards, we are custodians, we are not just a party that believes in grabbing for today and forgetting about tomorrow. So thank you for those words. I find them really inspiring. I just want to finish by reminding everybody that Climate Nature Emergency is a cross-cutting project, and you know what I mean by that. It's one that every officer of the Council, every member of the Council needs to play a part in, and which our communities are joining us in, supporting us by their increased recycling, by their endeavours to be environmentally friendly in their own lives. We are in this together. We are united in wanting a secure future for our children and their children, and in protecting this beautiful valley that we live in. But I just want to finish by thanking hugely Rachel, particularly for drawing this big piece of work together, Gren for your work, and Veronica too, in pulling the data that we need together. But also to thank people like Michelle and Claire Cutforth and Sam with the food work that she does. This is such a wide-ranging project, and it's one that infiltrates every aspect of our work. I couldn't possibly thank all the officers involved, but I would want to single those out today because I know of the work that they do. I'm just hoping that we continue to drive this agenda right out into every little aspect of the work this council does, and thank you to everyone that does it. Thank you.
No other indications in the chamber, Leader.
Great, thanks. If I can just come in then and say a few words, just to add my name to those thanking the officers for their hard work in this. I think we're blessed in Torvine to have officers who are both passionate about this area and also deeply skilled in doing the pragmatic work that's needed. I've been very impressed by people like Rachel and Veronica and their work on nature and biodiversity, and Gren and his work with local groups to really extract the benefits for local groups as well as helping cut our emissions. Because I guess this is like any inconvenient truth. We can either address it or we can hide from it. And as Sue said, bury our heads in the sand. And I'm glad that we've got a clear commitment here to not hide, but instead of hiding, to take action. And the bonus, I guess, is that it does create jobs and can make savings for local groups. So thank you to Sue for your leadership on this, and thank you to all the officers who are involved in this. We're not tackling this because, as Dave said, we're some kind of ultra woke council. We're tackling it because there's a challenge that affects our communities and that we want to address. And I believe that in addressing it, we can also offer benefits to some of those groups. Some of the examples we heard at that gathering were inspiring examples from community groups who are saving hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds on their energy bills, as well as reducing their emissions. So really welcome that work too. Any other questions or contribution from the chamber? If not, are we happy to move to the recommendations? There at paragraph 8.1, it's recommended that Cabinet notes the content and approves the Climate and Nature Emergency Annual Reports for 2024-25 as set out in Appendix 1. Can I have a show of hands in favour? I believe that's carried unanimously. There's no votes against and no abstentions. Thank you for your hard work on that. If I can then move to agenda item 9, which is the Complaints Annual Report, and if I hand over initially to Peter on this.
Thank you, Leader. The report provides an overview of the annual complaints performance for 2024-25 and also presents the Public Services Ombudsman's annual letter for Cabinet to note. I briefly want to set out the key headlines from what I believe to be a very positive report. There has been a decrease in complaints from 248 in 23-24 to 206 in 2024-25. However, numbers remain higher than previous years, which can partly be attributed to a review in 2022-23 of how contacts are categorised. We undertook and implemented this review to help ensure, as a council, we are able to strengthen accountability and transparency for residents around the council's complaints process. Regarding the number of complaints escalated to the Ombudsman for Wales, there was an increase from 14 to 20, although some were carried over from the previous year. Despite the increase, we remained below the national average and there were no investigations, interventions or recommendations made by the Ombudsman. This indicates that our processes are robust and effective in final resolution. We also achieved the second lowest rate of complaints contacting the Ombudsman at 0.2 per 1,000 population. Importantly, the team was notified of 202 compliments across the authority, a significant increase on the 155 from the previous year. It is important that good practice is also recognised and shared with teams. A copy of the report was presented to the Governance and Audit Committee on the 25th of September 2025 in line with the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, which gives the committee a defined assurance role around complaints. I attended that committee and there was very positive feedback from the committee about the report. The complaints team will continue to work closely with the Ombudsman's office and colleagues to ensure that the complaints are handled effectively and provide valuable insights and learnings. I am joined by Chris Corton, the Council's complaint team leader, who will provide a little more detail on some of these key points and answer any questions. But before I hand over to Chris, I just want to put on record my thanks to him and his team for the outstanding work they do in this field. Chris, I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, much appreciated. And I think what Councillor Jones has just said there captures the main essence of the report and the highlights. We've had a slight decrease, but numbers are still higher following the review of the way that we categorise the complaints. But I think despite that, we're still managing to exceed the 95% compliance targets. We achieved 97.3 last year. We're just a small team, there's only 4 of us, so we don't do that on our own. So I think, as always, it's the engagement of the officers and departments that help us to deliver those outcomes and to ensure that we are accurately and effectively considering the information that's coming at us through the complaints themselves. So we appreciate the time and investment from officers, departments and teams to help us resolve those issues and also identify and implement improvements where we come across those. So as Councillor Jones mentioned, there was a higher number that went on to the Ombudsman. I think that's reflective across public services as is detailed in the annual letter. Despite that, it is important that we didn't have any interventions or investigations from the Ombudsman. And like Councillor Jones said, it's a positive reflection of the authority's handling of the complaints process. And again, another positive is that increase that we've seen in the compliments that are coming to us. So I think it's important for those to also be recognised and shared within the report as a balance against the complaints and celebrate that good practice where we receive that. Going forward, we'll continue to work with officers, departments, and also to try to ensure that the process is as accessible as possible to the residents. So we've done some work around leaflets and some posters to make sure that they know how to contact us if and when they need to. The staff, we've approached the Ombudsman's office because they deliver free training for us, so we'll be looking to try to implement that in the new year, and we'll start to reach out to departments then to bring them in and arrange those sessions. So thanks everyone for your time and consideration of the report, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you.
No indication in the chair. Oh, sorry, Sue Morgan.
Sorry, just can't let the moment pass without acknowledging in 4.6 of the report the significant drop in complaints for waste services in September 2024 following improvements to collection arrangements. And just to say well done to the leadership of that service and led by Mark Thomas and Claire Cutforth so ably. Long may it continue. Thank you.
David Daniels, leader.
Oh yeah, just to say to acknowledge that we're amongst the lowest for complaints reaching the Ombudsman, which I think is a real testament to yourself and the small team that you've got, and also the increase in compliments. I mean, we as you can imagine people are mostly motivated to complain, so to receive an increase in compliments is really a testament to I think the quality of service that we provide in Dorvine. So yeah, just to add thanks really for the work that you do.
No other indications, leader.
Okay, yeah. Echo all those comments. Thank you for your hard work. As any larger organisation, we're not always going to get things right. When we do, it's good that we have a complaints process to help resolve and learn. It's also good that there's that compliments process so that it's recognised when our staff go over and above the call of duty, as so many of them do in our communities. So thank you for that. If we can move then to the recommendations. We're on page 151 at 8.1 of the report. Cabinet's invited to note the information presented in this report and agree to continue to support the Central Complaints and FOI team. Provide any comment in relation to the annual letter from the Public Services Ombudsman. So can I have a show of hands in favour? Okay, I believe that's everyone, so no votes against or abstaining. Okay, so if we go on to, thank you for that report. Item 10 then, which is the National Joint Committee for the Adoption Service and Foster Wales.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of the report is to seek Cabinet approval for a deed of variation to amend the quorum requirements for meetings of the National Joint Committee. Currently, the quorum is set at 60%, which equates to 14 members. But experience since the committee's inception in April 2024 has shown that this level is difficult to achieve. 2 out of the 3 scheduled meetings were inchoate, despite efforts to improve attendance. The Joint Committee oversees collaborative arrangements for adoption and fostering services across Wales. It is a critical governance mechanism, particularly for Foster Wales, which has no legislative basis for national cooperation. Reducing the quorum will ensure the committee can function effectively and avoid wasted resources. Following consultation with stakeholders, including the WLGA and ADSS Cymru, and a recommendation from the Joint Committee itself, the proposal is to reduce the quorum to 40%, with representation from at least 3 regional areas. A deed of variation has been prepared to formalise this change. There are no implications for the Council. This change will simply ensure meetings can proceed and resources are used efficiently. Legal advice confirms that this amendment is permissible and must be approved by each local authority in accordance with its own governance arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. So this is something that's national and has been taken through all 22 councils in Wales?
Yes, that's correct.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, colleagues?
No indication, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. Then I believe the recommendations are at 7.1 on page 180 in your packs. That's that Cabinet agreed to reduce the quorum of the Joint Committee to 40%, with at least 3 regional areas represented. And secondly, authorises the entry into the signing of the deed of variation attached at Appendix 3 to enable this. Can I have a show of hands in favour? I believe that's unanimous. No votes against or abstentions? No. Okay, that report's carried. Thanks, Jason, for that. And thank you, colleagues, for your patience today. Sorry I couldn't join you in person. You wouldn't want to have been infected with my germs anyway. And I look forward to seeing you on screen later and hopefully in person tomorrow. Take care.